So if you work with strands of pixels, and these are serial data controlled individually addressable pixels, you will run into a situation where it just stops. So one of your strands breaks, one of these pixels is bad, and then anything after the bad pixel doesn't work. So we need to replace the bad pixel. The question is this pixel bad in preventing data going from all the other pixels, which is likely, or is this pixel working, but the serial port on the way out is bad and it's preventing data getting to this pixel? Now you can see this guy's actually flickering and flashing, so if I had to guess, I'd say this was the bad pixel. We could replace just it. But if we're going to be cutting in two places and soldering or somehow connecting in two places, it's easier to do it here and there and replace both pixels with known good pixels. So there's my string of extra pixels. I'm going to replace both of these guys so that even if this one happens to be bad, which is unlikely but possible, I won't double my effort. Now these guys take data in from one side and pass it out to the end of the strand. And many of them have some type of arrow or indicator on them, but to make it very obvious, I'm going to label these guys in the direction that the data goes, so when I solder them in, I don't solder them in backwards. Alright, so in hooking up these two wires, you can either get the orientations of the bulbs right and just make sure the wires match, or if you look closely, one of these wires has a black line on it that matches up the black line on that other wire to convince yourself you have them in the right orientation. Now, most people who do this in the field don't solder. They use some type of crimp connector or one of those fancy solder in the middle of a heat shrink tubing butt connector. But since I'm doing this on my bench, I'm just going to be putting the heat shrink on top of the wires and then soldering them together. And of course, the trickiness when using heat shrink that's this small is you want to make sure you don't have any solder blobs in here that it won't be able to flow over. So I put a piece of solder on the iron to get good conductivity of heat, wait for the wire to heat up, and then put the solder on the other side of the wire to draw a very small amount of solder into the strands. And then we're ready for the heat gun. And then we test it, and it works great. Notice I cut out close to the pixels, gave me extra wire here and here, and that way when I have a little extra wire on these pixels, I have a little extra wire on either side because it's better to have more than not enough. And so I'll just space these out equivalently and then tighten down those zip ties and be done.